All right, we have reached 30 after the hour, so let's get started. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar to learn about crafting and presenting compelling stories. I'm Stephanie Maurice Beeson from SciCai headquarters. I'm excited to be able to welcome you today, whether you're watching live or the recording. I will briefly introduce today's speaker, and I'll address a couple of housekeeping issues before passing it over to our speakers. As the International Psychology Honor Society, SciCai supports our members to study and share psychology in ways that further our understanding, deepen meaningful connections with others, and lead healthier lives. In service of that mission, we're grateful to be able to host this webinar featuring Dr. Kimberly O'Brien and Tanya Eccles. Dr. Kimberly O'Brien is an assistant professor in the Department of Organizational and Leadership Psychology at William James College and adjunct faculty in the Clinical Psychology Department. She's also a faculty member of the Neuroscience of Leadership Psychology concentration. Outside of William James College, Dr. O'Brien is also the owner of Neuralite Consulting, LLC. She earned her PhD in social psychology with a specialization in psychophysiology from Brandeis University in 2011. Her dissertation, which garnered the APA Dissertation Award, centered on moral decision-making under stress. Following her PhD, she completed a 4-year postdoctoral fellowship in developmental psychobiology at UMass Boston Harvard Medical School in 2014. Dr. O'Brien was also honored as a Harvard University Sackler Scholar Fellow in Psychobiology and received the National Institutes of Health NLP Award for her research on psychophysiological health disparities. Her research focuses on the effects of social ostracism, implicit biases, and social devaluation, as well as the protective and reparative processes that can mitigate these impacts. Our other speaker, Tanya Eccles, is the 2024 president of the SciCai chapter at William James College, where she's completing her PsyD in organizational leadership psychology this spring semester. Any day now, I think. So congratulations in advance, Tanya. A global leader and multi-award winning international executive coach and leadership and organizational development consultant, Tanya is the founder and managing principal of Vigere, a global coaching and consulting firm. Tanya has 30 years of experience in corporate management, digital and traditional media, technology, finance, coaching, leadership development, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. She works with numerous organizations across a variety of industries, including Fortune 500 companies. Tanya is an adjunct faculty member for the graduate programs at William & Mary and Harvard University Extension School, teaching leadership and organizational behavior. Her writing has also been featured in several publications, including Forbes and HuffPost. Tanya is a professional certified coach, credentialed by the International Coach Federation, where she has held several global leadership roles, including the General Enterprise Board and as chair of the Professional Coaches Board. So you can see that our two speakers have a wealth of knowledge and insight to share with us, and we're really excited to hear their presentation. The recording of this webinar will also be posted on our website in case you need to leave early or if you'd like to view it again in the future or share it with your friends. I know it's going to be very beneficial. The audience will remain muted for the presentation. If you have any questions, please enter them into the chat and we'll leave a good amount of time at the end to address those questions. So now, without further ado, I will pass the mic to Dr. O'Brien.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited that you're here with us. So the world needs your story. And I think that's such a great title for our chat today. We started with, if we go to the first slide, I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to be chatting about today. So my thought is that we just touch on these things a little bit and then open it up because I want to honor who's here and answer your questions. So we will go over what are your aha moments? What are those moments of transformation that might be the seed of a talk? How to refine that idea? Looking at evidence-based talk. So we're going to go over fact checking and how important that is. The power of rehearsals and the feedback that you get from your rehearsals. We're going to talk about body language, which is very important, especially for a TEDx where you are, your full body is on that stage. We'll talk a little bit about color theory and actually the psychology of color theory. And then I want to open it up to the TEDx process and answer any questions you have about that process. So go to the next slide, please. So I think at the beginning of developing a keynote or a TEDx, there is this sense of reflection, of going back to a point in time where you had your aha moment, where you had something that was transformative, where you maybe felt like you evolved in a moment. And those are the moments that are the greatest seeds for a large talk or a keynote. And oftentimes, because we reflect, some of these things may or may not be conscious. So the first part is finding that idea. Maybe you already know when it was for you, or maybe it might take some reflection of something very powerful, some transformative moment for you. So that's the first step, is finding that, or if you already have it, starting to go back to how did you get to that point of transformation? And it does take a certain amount of reflection. In my experience, people start with maybe a lot of ideas, or if you've had a lot of transformation. And as psychology folks, we tend to be a bit reflective. So you might have some ideas, like I know exactly what happened when I stopped something or started something, when I left something, when I made a decision to do another level of self-care. So those are the things that can become teachable moments in a talk. And I think throughout this process, one of the things that was very profound for me to organize a TEDx and have this collaboration to organize this TEDx was the underlying all of the talks was the intention to help others. And I just found that so lovely. And I think that that is, again, true for psychology folks. My students, for sure, really have this intention to help others and elevate others. And that thread definitely comes out. So that's the first part, is just recognizing, when did I have these moments? I'm sure all of you have, and I'm sure all of you can share that. So how do you refine your idea, and is it innovative? This is often a challenge for folks, because when we were looking at auditions, I think one of the things that we found was that it was moments when people could take that transformative moment for them and reframe it for us in a way that it was new, that it was a new idea. So if we were talking about a sense of belonging or a sense of burnout, so our speakers were able to take these moments and say, I'm gonna share it with you in a different way. And I remember very distinctly my brain kind of going, oh, that's a new way, that's a powerful way of addressing that or looking at that issue. Refining does take some support. We had really a team of coaches and very helpful faculty and very helpful students who were just invested in supporting each other. So we took these, I think of it as a funnel process, like when you're writing a paper, you have all these ideas and all of these things that you think are very important, and you start to shake them out until you find that one, really the gem that is the idea that you want to share. And then the reflection piece is really carrying that into actionable items, so that, when you learn how to do something, or when you're giving a talk, you don't give the end of the talk first, right? You have to bring people to that aha moment. And so that takes a little bit of time to figure out, how did I get there? What are the steps that I can offer to others? And that tends to be toward the end of your talk. So I think the way that TEDx sort of shakes out is, it starts with more the personal narrative and the personal vulnerability, right? Because you are vulnerable. You're sharing something about your life and your transformation, and then it gets a bit more into the science, right? And that's where we go to fact checking. So this is so important, and I think sometimes speakers might overlook this, but it's so critical, particularly now. If you are going to be a trustworthy speaker and leader and teacher, you really need to go and look at the literature. Even if you've experienced something, chances are others have, and have studied what are the things that have worked, what are the things that haven't worked, how can you support your big idea. So again, we have this sense of I am going to share of myself and my life and my transformation, but I'm also going to provide you the evidence that this is how others also got through it. Or sometimes, again, if you know, because you've written papers, a lot of papers probably, you know that there's often a gap in the literature. And that can be part of your compelling story, part of why your story is innovative. So that's a good way to find that as well. And this is also a requirement of TEDx. So if you go through the guidelines, which are rigorous but well spelled out, you'll see that evidence-based and fact-checking is part of that, those guidelines. Okay, great. So rehearsals. Now this can be kind of painful for some folks, right? Because the way that we did rehearsals is really building up to a 10-minute talk. And it's a lot of self-evaluation, maybe in a way that you haven't done before. And so for some folks, they don't want to hear their voice. They don't want to look at how they're standing or whether they have disfluencies or what is their prosody and things like that. But this is so important. Just like anything that you practice, we know in neuroscience, one of the ways that you learn is to almost teach yourself. So you're memorizing your talk. That also helps you to infuse your evidence. It also helps you to get more comfortable on that stage. So we had, again, a nice community of very supportive folks who would look at each other's 2-minute pitches, 2-minute talks, and say, you're breathing kind of fast, or, I'm noticing you're slumping in your shoulders, and really a whole inside and out evaluation happened. And TED recommends 6 months to prepare your talk, and we had about 4.5 months. So this was a very fast track. So the inside and the out, meaning people got to observe themselves and hopefully have some sense of grace and some sense of self-care to say, okay, maybe I am, swooping my shoulders, but if you, press your shoulder blades together, you start to have better posture, and that changes your voice and it changes your eye contact. Some folks would want to have slides, but if you've watched TED, and we've watched so many TEDs by now, you'll see that there are sometimes no slides at all, or if you have them, they're impactful, right? And there is no teleprompter in a way that if you're at a conference, you can see your slides, you can see, your next items coming up. So for TED, really, you're in the bright lights, or for a keynote as well. Oftentimes there is not a teleprompter. And I think that's good because that helps you to connect with your audience, and you have studied how do you really get the brain of your audience engaged, right? And that is through that storytelling and that empathy with your story. So you add those elements in there. And I also think it's really important not to rehearse over Zoom, because we're used to Zoom and seeing our heads on Zoom, but it's really good to try to find spaces that feel like what that stage is going to be like. So we had our speakers, they were practicing in auditoriums, and they were practicing at a theater that was closed for the afternoon, and then practicing in large classrooms. And they never looked at the camera. We always had them looking and really seeing and imagining their audiences, right? Okay, go ahead next. Thank you. Okay, so slides or not, we probably have all used slides in our talks and presentations. I think for storytelling, it's really better to have 100% of the attention on the speaker. Because remember, when you're storytelling, you are infusing brains with visuals. So if you have visuals up there, that's fine, but it's better and more engaging for the brain to make its own visuals. And those ironic processes that if you say anything to a person, they have to make a mental representation of it. It's almost impossible not to. So I think it's better and more engaging for you to be the speaker and you be creating those visuals for your audience. And again, we know that's effective for brain engagement, right? Okay, next one. Okay, body language. This could be a seminar in and of itself. We are largely unconscious about our nervous tics or our ways of not wanting attention. And it's very challenging to be in a spotlight and not want attention. It's very challenging to kind of sink in the background. So there's a certain ownership that comes with developing a talk like this. There's an ownership of your entire being. And we look at eye contact. So sometimes people would get lost in memories, and you don't want to do that because that breaks engagement with the audience. So we really worked on I have eye contact all the time through this 10-minute talk. Eyes to the lights. So oftentimes people will have lights below them when they're rehearsing, but you really want to make sure where the lights are almost at your eye level. And again, if people get lost in thought, it's better to have the light in their eyes. That's also a part of a brain engagement piece. What are you doing with your hands? This is often very challenging because do we, steeple? Do we hold our hands? Do we have them by our sides? What feels natural? And these are all things that come from rehearsal, and they come from feedback from others and people noticing, hey, I noticed you were wringing your hands a little bit. And those things are not destiny, right? All of this is workable. It does take quite a commitment to sit with yourself quite often and see what those habits are and just work through them. With body habits, now we know it takes about 21 days to transform a physical habit, right? And then there's prosody. And so prosody for storytelling is so important. If you think about reading a story to a child, even if they know the story, they want to hear the story over and over and over again. So you want to practice to a point where you're strategic about your prosody. Where are you being quieter? Where are you landing a point? Where are you pausing before you land that point? And if you're a teacher or a mentor or leader, you know how difficult it can be to lead people to their own aha moments. And that's a lot of what this is. It's a lot of that. Let me first set the stage for you and tell you what I experienced, and then find the evidence, and then find this is what I discovered, right? Because you're asking people to change in a certain sense, right? To go through that story with you. So the pause moments are really, again, watching your breath, watching your respiration, practicing. We would have even points in the outline of their talks where there was a little word that said pause, pause here, just as reminders. Pause here, now land that point. Pause here, now land that point. And you'll see it in the talks. They are very strategic moments, right? And I often thought of this as authentic performance, because there is an element of performance, and you don't want to be super vulnerable. There's the strength part of vulnerability is what we're aiming for. So there is vulnerability, but you've been past this transformation, right? So facilitating those aha moments, I think, is a real skill, and that takes practice. So we also went over some color theory. Some of you might, as psychologists, might know some color theory. And we had folks who had worn gray and black for the last 15 years, and they started wearing orange and yellows and trying out other colors. Um, and color matters. It matters. And for a camera point of view, our Another Age Productions, which is where we videotape this, they're in Newton and they're wonderful. And we asked them for suggestions, and they said, really, no patterns, because patterns can make movement in a video, and really no black, red, or white. It's really better to have neutrals as much as possible. And our background was mostly red and black, and then their speakers were in a spotlight, right? So these are just things that you may or may not be thinking about when you're thinking about a keynote, when you're thinking about a TEDx. You have to really think about your entire being and your wardrobe, right? We also had, I'll show you, there's in that picture, there's a little red carpet. So we had to think about, oh, I don't want to trip on that little red carpet. Are you pacing? This is the little red carpet. So you're corralled to this 6-foot area, which is good because some people are pacers when they talk. And there's a little bit of pacing. But again, even with body language, if some people kind of bounce, if they're a little bit nervous, or they start getting out of the lights, and then we can't see them as well, right? So we had to think about all of these things. Okay, let's see. And then the TEDx process. So this really was a village. I mean, I had three students in particular. So Blake Cohen, Annie Lang, and Anthony Meek, who are second year doctoral students taking on this huge thing. And again, to wrap it up to the first point, they just wanted to contribute more and contribute to the student experience, contribute to elevating the student body, contribute to William James College. And um, and that was really a team that was so motivated to pick up different pieces of this process. So the application itself, if you've written any grants, it's pretty straightforward. Just making sure that you are in alignment with their values, which I know that you are. This society absolutely is in alignment with those values in terms of education, but also inclusion and respect for each other, all of these wonderful things. So there's that, and there's developing a theme. So we don't know next year what our theme is going to be, but our theme this year was elevate, and that only came from our meetings with the students when I just kept saying, you just want to elevate people, and it's just so wonderful that you want to elevate people. So that became the theme of our TEDx. So every talk was different and unique, but that was the underlying theme. Um, and then at TEDx, if you don't know, you can't get paid, and you're not really allowed to do self promotion. And again, it has to be evidence based. And for us in our process, we also made it required that they had to either do the course with me, I do a TEDx course, or they had to get a TEDx coach because we just wanted to hit it out of the ballpark. So that's, I know I'm going fast, I'm touching on some of these points, but I really just want to answer as many questions that you have and support you in whatever way that I can. So why don't we open it up for questions for y'all?
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that overview. And it gives us, I think, a really good context for all the work that went into this. And congratulations to you and all the incredible speakers. I was lucky enough to be there in person to see that. And just you could tell, while it still felt very natural, you can tell a lot of preparation went into that, both from the speakers, from all of the people behind the scenes, from our professors. It was wonderful to see that. I'm curious as we get our questions here. One of the things that came up, and you mentioned, I was so happy to hear you mention a couple of times keynotes, because we often think about our research and the work that we do as the opportunity to share our research to other people who understand research and understand psychology. And this being such a different venue, more like a keynote where you're coming to present to people ideas and themes and concepts that don't necessarily have the context for. They don't understand all of the statistical background, and what is that a good number, is that a bad number, what does that mean, is it reliable, is it validated? And I'm just curious as to what your thoughts are and the importance of being able to, yes, go to a conference and present at a conference or a poster, versus also being able to present this to people beyond our normal academic audiences.
Absolutely. And I think that's so critical because I think the work that we do often does not trickle down to the communities, which is where it's needed most, probably. So I think that a keynote is a great way to consider taking these not getting rid of all the academic language, but certainly considering talking more at an individual level. So I would say if you're sitting down with somebody and you've just met them and they say, "What do you do?" That level of, this is what I do, this is why it's important, without all the statistics and everything else. And I think all the same things apply in terms of rehearsals and feedback and your communication style. All of that matters very much so that you can clear everything else to get your points across. Right? We did some community conversation talks in a long time ago, and one of the things that we had to do was we first just went to lunch with folks. So this was community participatory research, and that was the first step, was going to lunch, talking about the work that we were doing, neuroscience level work, but with folks who didn't necessarily even know what we were talking about. So there is that skill, absolutely, of staying humble and bringing it down to, how can I help you with this research? And I think that a keynote is a beautiful way to do it, whether it's at a community center or chamber of commerce, or yeah, absolutely.
And as we know, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, the better you get at it, the stronger you're able to communicate in that way. The questions out there so far are just wanting the links, which is great because we just got all those over the last few weeks. So the links to actually go back and drive it. And please feel free to put more links in the chat. A few more things that I was just curious about as an audience member and a fellow student of the speakers that we had, really interested in understanding how do you take something that might feel a little, I don't want to say dry, but it may not be the most exciting topic in terms of, the work that we're doing for an average human who might come across our TEDx. How do we turn that into something that's sort of fresh and engaging for someone who doesn't have this type of background?
Right. Yeah. I think that honestly, part of it is just being excited about the work yourself, right? That's the first thing, is that if you're truly enthusiastic, if you're truly engaged, it's much easier to engage others, right? And I think some of these topics, even though they're different for folks and they may not apply to everybody, there is still a universal process of, I went through this tough time, or I went through this transformative time, and this is how I came to my aha moment. This is how I transformed, and this is why it's important, right? So I think if we stay within those types of things, we stay within the engagement of it. And again, I think also that part of it is knowing who your audience is, right? And knowing if they don't have any links to those things, if they're not interested in those things, you can still have a dialogue that is more centered around your humanity. These are human experiences, right? Perspective taking, we know, is one of the most powerful things that we can facilitate in others. And regardless of the topic, I think that perspective taking is one way to really engage a brain, because even if you don't have pain the way that I have pain, we can then empathize. We could say, oh, I felt that way too. I've experienced something like that. And that's the sweet spot where you want to get to with a keynote or a TED, is that kind of commonality.
Yeah. It's the human side, as always, right? It's about the humans and connecting it to a real story so it resonates with others is beautiful.
Absolutely.
Question from an audience member: how do you balance making sure that what you're sharing is both innovative and still research-based? Because I loved hearing that TEDx does require it to be evidence-based. So how do we make sure it's still innovative and research-based?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I think that there's something about the topics for us that it was a reframe. So it might just be a deliberate reframe and understanding this is not the end that it has to be, right? So if you go through something difficult, or you go through, I'm thinking about Anthony's talk on burnout, a lot of conversation about burnout, and we know that it is now considered, a mental health issue and problem, that people get burned out and it takes years to recover. And the way that he approached it was to say, you know what, I learned from this. And I remember that distinctly in his pitch. We all were like, oh, you can. So that idea that you can take something that was painful, and then what you can offer is, this is what I learned though. And now that I'm on the other side of it, I learned something. So I think that's one way of being innovative. And the other thing is to do your research, do your market research, do your research on the lit review. Oftentimes, again, whether you're a student or not, oftentimes we develop research ideas because there is a gap, right? So they've looked at this and they've looked at that, but what they haven't looked at is this particular community or this particular method of doing things. So gaps are wonderful if you find them, right? So the innovation, it's challenging though. I think people go about it in different ways, but I think reframing is one of the most powerful.
Yeah. And in some ways, there's nothing new under the sun. So there is a good chance that someone somewhere has done at least some level of research that you can use some support to be able to show that there's evidence behind that idea that you have. Speaking of that, also there's a great question is, can you give TED Talks on topics that already have had TED Talks? And that's a vast population when you think of all the TEDx's around the world, but it's specifically even for our example, within James College, how do you select those topics, and what if someone has done it before?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think of it when I'm chatting with clinical students who want to, they just want to save the world, and they want to do, these programs for teenage girls on like body self-esteem. And then they go and look at their literature and say, oh, everybody's already done it. And I always say, no, it's endless. First of all, there's endless need, and you are you. You're going to do it uniquely the way that you went through it. So those two things, absolutely, it doesn't matter if somebody has done burnout or if they've done something else that you are passionate about, you will do it in your unique way because of the way that you went through your life and how you got transformed. That's going to be different than anybody else who's ever done it. Also, the way that you practice your talk, the evidence that you're going to be fine, is going to be different than whatever anybody else has done. We always need new data, always, 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 right? Particularly because we are having some challenges replicating some of these studies. So we always need great evidence and new data. And you are absolutely unique in how you went through your transformation. So that's still a great and unique story.
Which comes back to the earlier discussion of making it human, making it something you're truly excited about, because then that makes it different from the very moment you start that whole conversation. So I love that.
Right.
I see another question in the chat here, obviously wanting to get the links to our TEDx, which is wonderful. We're happy to share those. But also, you mentioned watching lots of other TEDx's, and curious if you have any, again, it's off the top of your head, so no worries. I'm sure we can share those later. Any ones that stood out for you, or maybe even some of the TED Talks outside of even just TED Talks that you think might be useful for people to reference?
Yeah, there's a bunch. There is actually, this is a little sad, but there is the top best 10 and top best worst 10. And if you go to YouTube and look at those, and we did scrutinize them, Brene Brown, there's a bunch of them that we know are just so stellar. And then there are other ones that are a little bit sad because we might like the research, but they didn't practice enough, or there was something not quite present about the speaker, so that wasn't really engaging enough. But I can find that list for you and post that. But I think when we watched those, we started watching them in a very different way. It wasn't for our own self-growth, or wasn't for our own interest. It was more, how is this person communicating? What are they doing with their body language? What are they doing with their research? Is the audience engaged? So it was a much more objective experience when we watched them. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious also, that gets into a little bit about the course you said developed, that there was a choice between having your own TEDx coach, because some folks were actually already graduated, so they weren't all current students. So they had the option to either select a TEDx coach of their own or to go through this course. I'm just curious about the course, because you developed that course from yourself, and obviously it was part of their semester credits, right, to actually get that done.
Yeah, I mean, it was really fun because it was so engaging. And for me, what was so rewarding, actually, and this was unexpected, was the personal growth that they went through. Because their posture did get better. Their diction was better, and they didn't say like anymore. It was a really intense process for them. And we had some faculty, some alumni in there, and then we had some students who were not planning to take a TEDx, but they wanted to go through this process. And I largely followed TEDx guidelines. And then I do have a background in musical theater, so I've been in those scenarios where, okay, the lights are on. This is the things that you have to think about: audience engagement, eye contact, body language, all of those types of things. So it was a really good marriage, I think, of following the TEDx guidelines, and then also having some of that background that I could offer. So yeah, we went over everything that I went over today briefly was a module. So that went in depth. So color theory, try on some different colors. Did you feel different? Did people respond to you different? People responded differently. And then they would do their memorization of 2 minutes. Halfway through, did about memorization of about 5 minutes, and finally to about 9 minutes. And we're very strict. It's got to be 10 minutes because we needed to make sure we were moving through. But it was, I think, a very transformative process to even do that part. And I think they really loved it. They loved, like, who knew that this would be a way to really own part of yourself, own your bigness. And I think that's a psychological piece to it too, is really allowing yourself to be on a bigger stage. Just see yourself there, know that you are worth being there. Your idea is worth being there. And that was part of it was, and this was student feedback and alumni feedback, all very supportive, completely supportive. So there was never a gotcha, but I've got you. And that's the way to do it is I've got you. And I notice you're breathing a little fast. Okay, let's put in some pauses for you. So, it is a very vulnerable process as well, particularly if you're starting with something that is very meaningful and personal to you, right? And there's that balance of you don't want to cry on stage, you don't want to be too vulnerable. You want to keep it objective. But by the time I think they got to the TEDx, it was objective with the vulnerability, and that is that sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
Wonderful. I also love hearing that they had the opportunity to do the 2 minutes and then the 5 minutes. So just cognitively, they had the opportunity to step into that learning over time and get more comfortable rather than coming in memorizing 10 minutes all at once. That's incredible. And I also loved your comment that I've got you. That is so important, especially when you're getting feedback. And you mentioned the likes and how to use your hands and how do you stand kind of, you're getting really small as opposed to, again, taking up all your space and pulling your shoulder blades back together. And I'm just curious, and actually I'm curious as well, as this is a question from the chat, of how do you graciously receive the feedback and not get overwhelmed, or also giving that feedback if you're one of the people maybe supporting students in a similar type of program?
Yeah, I think we think a lot about what happens in the brain when you're receiving feedback. Just as a department, it's one of our courses. And I think the students know that as well. So I would say the balance is it's never negative feedback. It's always 90%, this was fantastic. It could be helpful if you worked on this particular element. And I think when you deliver feedback like that, it becomes more of a conversation, and it's harder for the brain to become defensive. And also, if they're in the course or if they're with a coach, there's kind of a commitment to like, I know I'm going to get some feedback, and that willingness and openness to really say, okay, just brace myself. And it's never as bad as what they think, right? So you're bracing yourself, and it's like, no, just add some pauses, and it's no big deal. And to normalize what we're saying, you've never done this before. It's going to be a challenge. There's no reason that you shouldn't be nervous. Let's get you practiced enough to where you're not nervous, or you know what to do with your nervousness, and just to really normalize, like, this is a big deal. Just like a keynote, this is a big deal. You are putting yourself out there to be scrutinized, and hopefully you're given your best self. And also, we can't all be everybody's cup of tea, so that's okay too. That's okay too. If they don't want to hear that talk, that's okay. There's enough people that do.
Love that. And it's so true. Not everything is for everyone, and we want to be aware of that, but it doesn't mean that something's bad or wrong. And often think about feedback through this affirming or adjusting or adapting, right? There are different ways that we can look at it, and not as good feedback or bad feedback. I'm
Yes.
also curious, when we're thinking about the process of getting ready for a TEDx, I'm curious about, sometimes we're just not ready. What comes up when those discussions have to occur or do occur from either the speaker or perhaps even the organizers?
Yeah, that's a tough question. So even though we went through an audition process, we had some readiness checks along the way. And readiness meant you are memorizing. We want to see, and even if you're not in the course, let's see a 2-minute memorization of how you're doing. Do you have your coach? Have you read all the guidelines? So the speaker guidelines are very clear. What are your references? I have to take a look at your references, making sure that they're empirical and peer reviewed. So there's no guarantee of the TEDx. And we tried to be clear about that. Just because you got the audition, we still need to make sure that we're going to have, readiness checks throughout. And so, if somebody wasn't quite ready, we had, as a group, the selection committee with our admin and staff and students, had a conversation to say, it may not be able to do this in 2 weeks. You may not be able to, now the timeline is really coming up, and, just feeling like it would really help you to have more time. It would really help you to, again, it is this, you don't know how fast or how slow, just like with personal transformation. We don't know, you could have an aha moment tomorrow, or something could take you 6 months. You go, oh, that's why I do that, right? So when in preparation, I really don't think you can do a TEDx in 2 weeks. And even though people were working up toward it, sometimes they're just not ready, or it would just be better to just wait. And then you still have the whole community of support, and a coach, and, go through the guidelines and go through my syllabus, and, really go through all of these areas. Yeah.
Yeah. And go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just going to say that is the power of this course. And you mentioned there were people who weren't even doing the TEDx who wanted to take it, because this is so much a part of what we do in our field with that use of self and our self-awareness, and being able to have those personal reflections to say, am I really comfortable doing this? And is this where I'm meant to be right now? And it's a not yet, not a no, but it could be a not yet.
Right.
And so it's important to keep that in mind as well, that is part of what we are learning for ourselves, learning for the research that we do, for the clients that we serve, all sorts of different ways that engages. We have another question here about the body language, which I do a lot of work on executive presence, and you've done so much of this work over the years as well. I'm curious if there are any other tips or tricks. Those are ones people always want to hear about.
Yeah. So I always say practice on newspaper, so you see if you're pacing or not. Check out your shoes. Are they squeaky or bouncy? Are you tripping over things? I mean, the basics 101, right, is closed body language or open body language, which we are very sensitive to. I mean, we know the research on that. If you have an open body, it's your whole presence is different compared to, crossing your arms, closed body position, withdraw, posture. And again, that idea of making sure that you're not reading down. Sometimes, if even in our auditions, people were reading down, and if you can read up. So even if you're doing an audition or interview over Zoom, make sure your eyes are up. And also, lighting 101, we go over lighting 101, portrait lighting. So things like that. I'm thinking, what else did we do with body language? I think just extraneous movements are tells of any kind. So whether that's like moving around too much, I think you have to get to a point of where you're really settled in your body and really have either meditated or did some, whatever you do, like deep breathing. I had one friend who's a coach, and she said, just go tuck off into the bathroom and just breathe, like really just, And I think the other thing about nervousness that I often said is that if you believe in your message, if you land and live in your message, that will help you to give that message with less nervousness. And that is so true. And I think this is true of psychologists too, because you are the leaders that we need speaking. These are the speakers that we need in our world. And your messages are so important, so critical. Messages about kindness and about transformation and about including each other and valuing each other. So I think those are so important. And if you can own your message, that really helps, because it kind of takes your ego out of the way a little bit, right? If you are a nervous person, you're like, well, I'm just a vessel. Okay, that can really help.
It's an addition to being grounded in your research and grounded in your topic, grounded in your body and grounded in yourself. And that can make a big difference in how you're showing up. I'm also just a little bit curious about the TEDx side of this and bringing this to William James. I'm just curious what inspired you to want to do this and make this happen.
Boy. I think for me, it was like a year ago in one of my courses, and during our residencies, we have on-ground residencies where they come and we're together. And I had some students who were presenting themselves. They were kind of a business idea, as if pitching their business idea. And it was so profound to me. I just was like, you all need a bigger stage. You just need a bigger platform. Like, you're in this classroom with these amazing ideas. And I just started, TikToking in my brain. So that when I finally started meeting with what I call Team Elevate, it was there. It was like, what's the biggest platform that we can facilitate? And it was a TED. And I was actually surprised that we had not done TED at OLP before, because we are leaders and have amazing ideas that need to be out there. And so that really started it. And I'll say it was a joyful process. I mean, it was work in a sense. I mean, it was time. I know people feel like whether they have bandwidth or not, but it was really a joyful process. Um, and I think also just legacy for the speakers. Like I'm always thinking about how to elevate my students in terms of how can I elevate your message? How can I make you bigger and open those doors if I can, or how can we as a faculty body? Um, so it was easy once, and then once we had the momentum, it just kept falling into place, falling into place. We didn't know how we were going to find the production company. One person in our community found this production crew. They were about 2 minutes away from campus. They were lovely. We had, great synergy. They're Emmy award winning. I mean, all these things just kept falling into place. So, but that was the spark, was seeing my students and really feeling like this is a waste of just being in a classroom. Like, we really need to get your voice. Like, yeah, you got an A in the course, but go, I was thinking conferences and, TED, and yeah, so that was the spark.
Yeah, and that's so important again. And exactly, we all as students in the student body, and all of us as Psychi members, the work that we do, and you see the incredible awards and the research that gets put out every year, and we see how much we have to share. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and you giving them a bigger stage, letting them step into their voices in a different way. And I know since our program is focused on leadership and leadership psychology, there is an expectation, at least this portion of William James. Obviously, we have our clinical and other areas as well, but there is an expectation that we can take this knowledge and understanding of psychology and neuroscience and all the wonderful work that we do, inclusive leadership, that we do all of that and bring it to the world, to people who aren't sitting at conferences all the time, and to people who may never go to a conference, to still have access to this kind of learning. That's how we share it, to your very first point, helping others in the world. And that's so important there. Another question here from BC. I'm not sure what BC stands for, but seems really important to me. I wanted to check in and see, you talked about the 6 months for actually getting prepared. We did about 4.5. How many hours do you think, when you look at an individual, how much time do you think they were doing offline, out of class, that sort of thing, outside of the things that you formally had structured for them?
That is a great question. I know the course was, well, technically 15 hours. I'm sure it was more 30 hours in contact, but I know that they also, the selection of speakers also started their own group chat, and they were always in contact, and they were always practicing, and they were always giving each other feedback. So it really became this other, I think it was probably a part-time job. Yeah.
Yeah, because you're practically, as you mentioned, practicing in auditoriums on their own, going out to take that time and find those places to be able to do it.
Walking your dog, practicing while you're walking your dog.
I can't tell you how many speeches and keynotes that my poor pets have listened to over the years, and they don't seem terribly interested, but they like me, so they listen to them. But sometimes doing it that way can help too. If you can get a pet to sit and stare at you for a while, that's usually a good sign.
That's an audience. That's a good audience.
I'm just curious. I know we're getting close on time here, but wanted just to think about that person who has this really powerful idea, but they're nervous about speaking. There are some people who, I will give you my research all day long. I'll create PowerPoints. Don't make me get up and give it to anybody. Don't make me that person. What would your advice be to them?
Well, I mean, I think if they absolutely don't want to be up there, it might just be that not yet time. But I would say that I think that these ideas are so critical to get out there. I think the world does need your story. And if someone has experienced what you've experienced, and you've made it through, and you've survived, and you've thrived, I think if you can live in that space within yourself, then maybe you can take some baby steps to giving that larger message. I think that some like more clinical folks might think about helping one person or you're helping a community. And I think if you can do this on a larger scale, you're helping an entire system, right? You're helping people that may not ever get that help in other ways. That's what's inspiring about it. You're not speaking to academics when you do a TEDx, or sometimes for a keynote, you're speaking to people who may not ever get the statistics on, trauma or whatever that you're presenting on. And it's a way to get those messages out to the larger world that I think is really meaningful. And so I would support you. Just email me. I'll keep chatting with you. Oh, I can't hear you.
We might have lost your sound, Tanya.
Let's try this. How about that? No, I was just actually reinforcing what you just shared, in that I've had class with you, Dr. O'Brien, and you are definitely there to support, and you have so much knowledge and insight. I'm curious if there's anything that you learned throughout this process. Well, I'm sure you learned tons throughout the process, but I'm curious about the thing that maybe surprised you the most.
I have to say it really is that the speakers look like different people to me. They're owning themselves in a way or they came into themselves in a way that I completely did not expect. And I think there's something about that self-reflecting, self-care that was so intense. They are literally have better posture. Their skin looked clearer to me. I don't know if it was work. They did more stress management, perhaps. I need to ask them about that. And we're going to do a webinar in September. And I'm going to ask them some of these questions. But that surprised me. There was something very much about their own personal evolution that they got bumped somehow into themselves and owned themselves and were willing to play with different colors or play with, speaking and what am I doing with my hands. And that just led to a larger sense of their presence to me. And that was immediate. Even in dress rehearsal, because I had seen them before about, the years prior, and I knew that they were wonderful and charismatic and wonderful speakers. But they were just next level now. They really were TEDx speakers.
Yeah. Which again, that's the beauty of making it a course, but also bringing it into our college, bringing it to William James, is that this is part of the journey. This is not just, hey, I got to go give this talk. I got to go give this speech. This is about your personal development, and that's going to carry through the rest of our lives for those of us who get engaged in that way. So I love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And what's your future? I know we just literally like a month ago just got through this, but not even maybe. I'm curious, what's your thought or hope for the future of William James?
Well, we already have the next one planned. We have the renewal. There's a renewal license that we have to go through. We're going to do that together as a team, probably in May. And then we're going to start, we have auditions planned for the beginning of November in residency. So we'll start inviting folks in and see what our theme will be. I am really excited to see who's going to be there. And I already know of a few folks that are going to do their 2-minute audition. So I think we're going to try to just really keep, going, trying it. There's a lot of folks. One of the most amazing and wonderful and meaningful things to me was to hear that at the end of our TED Talk, we had several of our students come up to our chair, Suzanne Devlin, and say, I could see myself doing this. And that's what we wanted. We were like, see yourself doing it.
Yeah. And just to see your own peers out there doing it and doing it so wonderfully as they all did, and just creativity and the innovation they did. It wasn't just, let me stand here and give you my speech. It was very much what you would expect from a TEDx, but I think also with our William James energy incorporated into it. So it was wonderful to see that as well. And anything else that's coming up for you as you think about what this journey's been like for you? You've seen it from inception in your mind to now having, a few weeks under your belt to have thought about it.
Yeah. I think I just want to continue to make psychologists, take those big stages, and whatever I can do to facilitate that and support that, I'm 1,000% happy to. Yeah. So.
And again, I know you mean that as well, and wanting to support students, obviously, and psychologists, but also in creating those spaces for people to learn more and to help others through these stories, through these experiences. To your earlier comments about this is more than just presenting research on a poster or presenting research at a conference, but helping people really connect to it and expanding our audience so people can see the opportunities they have to learn from the work that we do. So it's just so incredibly important. And I thank you again, Dr. O'Brien. You've been just wonderful coming into William James over these last few years. And again, having the ability to have taken classes with you and your commitment to us as students, but also being able to support Psych-Hi in this way and agreeing to come in and share what I think could be so beneficial, hopefully to obviously the people on the call shared that, but hopefully to everyone else. I'm not sure, Stephanie, if there's anything else you wanted us to do as we wrap up, but I think we have reached the end of our time.
Dr. O'Brien and Tanya, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. Thank you. Just please accept our gratitude on behalf of all the attendees. I'm feeling inspired, definitely, and I'm excited about how this material can be beneficial to all of our members in so many different ways, and I'm excited to get the recording out, so that we can keep passing along these wonderful learnings. I can't pick a top 5 favorite thing that you said, Dr. O'Brien. I just really, really loved it. So,
my pleasure. Thank you so much. And whatever I can do, whatever you need, let me know. I'm happy to pitch in wherever I can.
Yeah. I will share my top takeaway amongst the many. I don't know if it was the top, but your comment, Dr. O'Brien, about finding a bigger stage and for sharing your voice and being comfortable doing that. Because again, we can get very limited in our very restrictive areas. And for you to just to put it that way. My second one, they're probably tied, is we've got you. It's not a gotcha. It's a we've got you.
Yes.
Those are so powerful when people are nervous about doing this kind of activity. So thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you.
I wrote down the not a gotcha, I got you too. I'm going to be definitely borrowing that. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. We need more of got you.
And I see in the chat, keep an eye out for my future TED Talk. Yes, Felicia, we will. We will. Yes. This is wonderful. That's what we want to hear and see.
So great. Awesome. All right. Well, I think I'll officially end us now. And thank you so much for your time. And to our attendees, thank you all for joining us for today's webinar. Hope this was helpful. It sounds like it did resonate with folks. I'm really excited about that. Remember that the recording will be posted on our website if you'd like to view it again or share it with your friends. That's psychi.org. And there's also lots of other resources that Psych-Hi has available. And we will also get the links to the William James TEDx so that we can share those out with everyone as well. So thank you again, Dr. O'Brien. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great day.
Have a great day.